Let's jump in B'siyata D'Shmaya. Quick review. Yesterday, with Hashem's help, we began learning Torah Aleph. We learned that by way of living a life of Torah, Yaakov Avinu life, finding HaKadosh Baruch Hu in every single thing, the seichel sheyesh b'chol davar, l'kasher atzmai l'chochmah v'seichel sheyesh b'chol davar, that through that, a person is zocheh to elevate chen, to bring chen upon themselves and upon the Jewish nation where it belongs, and through that, a person's tefillas are neskabel, a person's tefillas are able to be received by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we saw what's the deeper meaning of this, that engaging in the Torah lifestyle, meaning finding Torah throughout a person's life, brings chen about a person. Rebbe Nachman says because chen is really ches and nun. Ches is the aspect of chochmah, that's seichel, that gives chiyus to everything. Milashon ches yud taf, right, is chiyus. And a person finds that chiyus, finds that ches reflected in the letter nun. The letter nun is a reference to malchus, because the pasuk says lifnei shemesh yinayin shemai, and Rashi comments lashon malchus. We don't mind closing the door. It's going to make a little bit of noise, but we do have WD-40 on the way, so apologize to anybody who's listening. There we go. Beautiful. Right? So the ches reflected in the nun, which is our lived experience of this worldliness, a person who's using dafka, the human experience in this world, to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence throughout his or her daily life, such a person is living a life of Torah, and it's malechein alim deha, because that person is bringing together the ches and the nun, which spells chen, and this person is able to live a life of Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu as opposed to Esav. Esav is a person, Shabizas Abachayra. Right, we said Vayivas Esav as Abachayra is speaking about the aspect of Ches, he doesn't want it, and he also rejects categorically the idea that a person can live in this world and see it as a place that's bursting with the presence of Hashem. So, V'chafra halavana, right, so he embarrasses the Lavana as well. Vayivas as Abachayra, that's the Shemesh, and he embarrasses the Lavana, that's the Nun. Esav's not having any of it. Another aspect, just before we start reading inside from Kehal Yedidim, we spoke about Nun as being the concept of finding Hashem in this world. That's true. The approach Rebbe Nachman takes and others in their Mefarshim, in Likutei Halachos and in other Mefarshim, is that Nun can also mean, it's not different, but Nun can also mean, aside from our lived experience of this world, our interactions, Ben Adam l'Chaveroi, Ben Adam l'Atzma, and so on and so forth, Nun can also be a reference to Tefillah, right? The dafka through making oneself humble, like David HaMelech that said about himself, Tefillah la'ani kiyate va'ani tefillah, that tefillah is a way of being able to access the Chochmah, and also emunah, which is bound up with tefillah, as we're going to learn later in the Kutumran. Vahi yadav emunah, it says by Moshe Rabbeinu his hands were faithful, but if you look at the Targum, it says that his hands were spread in prayer. Pirsan b'tefillah, his hands were spread in prayer. So those are two other aspects also of what it means. Malchus, again, Rebbe Nachman's Torah can be interpreted and understood on many levels. They're all interlocking and interconnecting. So all of these aspects, both living life with the eyes of Yaakov Avinu and the person who's humbling oneself in tefillah as well as emunah, these are ways to being able to access Hashem's presence. But Esav v'chafra alavana, he embarrasses the moon, doesn't have it, and therefore is not able to access the bechayra, which he sells away and he embarrasses. And Yaakov Avinu buys the birthright. Why? Because Yaakov is a person, again, who's buying into this lifestyle. That's Yaakov Avinu. We said that each and every one of us has inside of ourselves a Yaakov and an Esav. They come in the form of the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, because this is literally the whole summation of what a Yetzer Tov is and what a Yetzer Hara is. We have an inner Yaakov and an inner Esav, and our job is to bring power to the Yetzer Tov, to overcome the Yetzer Hara, and that is by living, again, this lifestyle of Torah. Let's jump back inside. When a person's living life in this way, through this is neskabel, all the tefillas and all the bakashas, all the prayers and all of the requests. So how does that work? What's the mechanism? The main reason why our tefillas are not accepted is because words need grace. In order for words to be accepted, they have to carry a certain degree of chen. If somebody asks for tzedakah, this is the most prevalent example. A person knocks on your door and they don't ask in a way of grace. You might want to give them, but it's not so geschmack, right? It's not so geschmack to give a person who's demanding, who's gruff, who a person who asks with a smile on their face, a person who's speaking with grace, a person who you feel a real emotive connection with, you're much more likely to give. So when a person doesn't have grace, it's almost as if there's no room in your heart for the words to go in. If everybody on the chat can mute, we'd be very grateful. Thank you so much. It's almost as if there's no room in their heart in your heart for the words to enter. It's as if there's no room in the heart of the person who's being asked because the words don't have chen, they can't go in. When a person is living a lifestyle of nun and ches, moon and sun, malchus and chochmah together in chen, and we said it makes the word chen. And this is why the Torah is called a yalas chen, this graceful dough, where it's bringing about, according to Rebbe Nachman, ya'alas, it raises chen, ches, and nun on a person. So a person has chen, beautiful. When our words have chen, they can get in. They go in. Then a person is zeiche that their words are divrei chen because he has grace now, ches and nun, and so they're able to go into the heart of the person that he's asking from, which in this case is a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And then the person's tefillas and the person's requests are accepted. Like any person in this world who speaks with chen, the words are going into the heart of the person from whom, or in this case, the deity, the ultimate being, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we're asking from, that we're davening. Says the Rebbe, and this formulates a brand new element in the lesson, which is the final element in the lesson. And then Rebbe Nachman, after bringing about all of the novel concepts, then stops and then he goes through all the different places in Torah that we're going to find this teaching, most specifically toward the end of the Torah in the teaching of Rabbi Bar Chana, right, which we said all of these first 16 lessons are an explanation in the visions at sea of Rabbi Bar Chana, as we're going to see with S-E-E, right? Bechinas taf. So he says this creates the element of taf. Just interestingly enough, if you have the letter ches and nun written in script, and you bring them together, that's literally the letter taf. Right? So in a very basic level, if you have a ches and a nun and you bring them together, that's the letter taf. So that's also true. But what does the Rebbe mean? Once a person has bound the nun of Olam Hazeh together with the ches, the belief that a Kadosh Baruch Hu has a master plan, and you find that master plan reflected either through approaching the world with the eyes of Yaakov to find the seichel and everything, or through the nun of tefillah, or through the nun of emunah, and a person's living a life of Yaakov Avinu, and you make chen, tav. This makes the letter taf, which if you spell it out, is a word, taf yud vav. Do you know what it means? It means to carve. That word, tav, means to carve. It's a pasuk in Cheskel, v'hisvisa tav, and you shall carve a carving. Makesher. What does ches and nun make carving? Because what did we say about a person who's trying to ask something from someone else that he doesn't have words of chen? It's almost as if there's no room in the heart of that person for the words to go in. But when you have chen, it makes tough, because it carves out room in that person's heart, and your words are able to enter. Your words are able to enter. I have to do something about that door, like almost immediately. Sorry, it's okay. When your words have chen, they are able to make room in that person's heart for the words to go in. Because again, when a person has grace, their words are accepted. So we find that words of grace make room in the heart of the person who's being asked, so that the word should go in via kabel bakashasai, and whatever the person's asking should be responded to. And this carving and this etching, zebechinas taf, is the aspect of the letter taf. So says the Rebbe, beautiful. Now you have nun and ches, and you have another bechina which is taf. Well, put those words together. What do you get when you put nun and ches and taf together? Says the Rebbe, this explains the pasuk in Keheles, which now the whole entire pasuk takes on a new meaning, which says divrei chachamim benachas nishmaim. What does it mean on a simple level? The words of the wise, divrei chachamim benachas nishmaim, they are heard benachas. Now on a simple level, this is true. Have a person shouting and screaming and giving mussar all the time, not so good, not so easy to hear words like that. A person who speaks gently, words go in. Right? That's okay. That's what the pasuk means on a literal level. Says the Rebbe now, because his words have chen, right? Nachas comes from the word chen, sure, right? Same root, same letters. So now the Rebbe explains it in a much deeper level. Divrei Chachamim benachas nishmaim. If you remember when we had our little intro to Kabbalah, it's a bit of a shame that I called it intro to Kabbalah, ki'ilu, like that's like we covered nothing. We covered a little bit of the 10 spheres. Like there's so many different things that ought to have been spoken about, but 45 minutes is 45 minutes. So it was an introduction to an introduction to an introduction, ribavos alafim times. It wasn't really an introduction to Kabbalah, a little bit. But we spoke over there about Malchus. If you remember, we correlated Malchus with a human functionality, which was, remembers? Speech, right? Malchus peh. Dvarim, words, is always Malchus. Malchus is the function of speech. Malchus is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu used, so to speak, to create the world as Malchus, right? Is our physical creation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke it into existence. Malchus is always correlated to speech. Says the Rebbe, okay, look at this pasuk now with new eyes. Divrei is Malchus, that's Nun. Chachamim is Chochmah, Ches. Chochmah and Malchus. Benachas, now you have Nun and Ches and Tav and Nishma'im. Now your words are accepted. In this pasuk, says the Rebbe, based on the Hakdamas that he revealed, the whole pasuk takes on a brand new mashmais. Divrei Chachamim, if a person approaches the world with Yaakov Avinu eyes of Chochmah, and Mamela, the Diburim of the world change because the Malchus is illuminated. It's a Malchus to Kedusha. It's a moon that's, yes, reflecting the light of the sun. Ben Nachas Nishma'im. Nun and Ches, you have Chen. Tav, Nachas. Nun Ches Tav. Tav, it etches out room, Kiviyachol, in the heart of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Nishma'im, and your tefillas are niskabel. The whole Torah Aleph just in one pasuk. Yeah, yes, unless it's absolutely because we have so much to get to, okay? Thank you. And because that creates the word nachas, and then a person's tefillas are heard. Therefore, says the Rebbe, now that all elements of Torah Aleph have been revealed. Therefore, Yaakov, is the aspect of seichel al-kain zachal al-kain. That's why Yaakov Avinu is zeicha for kain, because the pasuk of Beis says, Yaakov Avinu said, Ki chanani Elokim, Hashem has grace to me. Hayuladim asher chanan, right? Chanani Elokim. So what's Kester? Maybe Avram should speak about Chen. Maybe Yitzchak. He says the Rebbe, no, it's Daika. It's specifically Yaakov, because Yaakov Avinu is the person who's finding the Chochmah in the Malchus, right? And by the way, that's also reflected in his name. There's so much to go into on the level of Ramazim, but Yaakov's name is literally Yud Ekev. What's Yud? Yud is always Chochmah, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? And Yud is the sphere of Chochmah. Yud Ekev. Yaakov finds the Chochmah in the Ekev, in the Ikvayim, right? That's Yud Nun. Yinain Shemai is Yaakov. Yud Nun. Yud, Chochmah, Nun, Malchus, Ekev, right, the lowest level. That's Yaakov Avinu's whole thing. Ki chanani Elihin. And he gave that bracha over to his children. Right? And he spoke about his children, and he conferred grace, which is, we understand, is much more than grace. This lifestyle of Ches and Nun, he gave that over to his children. Now the problem was, Binyamin wasn't there because he wasn't born. So Yosef covered his father's bases, and he gave a bracha to Yosef. Right? The bracha that Yosef gives to Binyamin is Vaiter Chen. Now, why was it Yosef? Because V'dafka Yosef hayachal avercha b'chein. It was specifically Yosef HaTzadik who was able to give this bracha of Chen. Because Yosef HaTzadik and Yaakov were deeply, deeply connected. Ela told us Yaakov, Yosef, right? And the Medrash comments, whatever happened to Yaakov happened to Yosef. The Medrash comments that the most diuknai Yosef was exactly like Yaakov Avinu, which the Ben Ish Chai parenthetically says in his comments in his Agadas on Saita, which I say over often because it's a pella. He says the whole story with Yosef and Ashes Beitifar. Why did he have the strength to be able to overcome that? Because the vision of his father, Demus Diuknai, appeared to him, says the Gemara in Saita Bechaloin, in the window. Says the Ben Ish Chai, right? The Ben Yayada, he says it could have appeared anywhere. It's a vision. He said, well, why in a window? It could have shut up on the ceiling or anywhere else. Tub Shatim says an interesting thing. Maybe she had some kind of special magic ball, a sorcerer's ball. It's called a chaloin. He says maybe he showed up there. Okay. But he said another pshat. An amazing thing. He says because the Medrash says that Yosef and Yaakov looked exactly the same. He says he didn't see Yaakov Avinu, he saw his reflection in the window. He caught his reflection and he saw, oh my goodness, I'm mamish the face of Yaakov Avinu. There's another approach in the Mefarshim that he looked out the window and saw the sun. And the sun is Yaakov. It's because we learned that the son is Yaakov. And in his own dream, Yaakov is the son. And the Medrash says that Yaakov had a name, Shemesh. One of Yaakov's names was Shemesh, So Rebbe Nachman doesn't bring all those midrashim because it's not his point. His point is just to say the emes. After that, he says, go look in all the midrashim, you see the whole thing reflected. But you see, I'm just giving you a little remazim how deep you can go with all of this. Okay, fine. This is Yosef. Ki Yaakov Yosef Kechal Yaakov and Yosef are considered one. Also, Al Pi the spheres, they are both Amud de MC, so they're both the middle line, because Yaakov is Tiferes, we have sphere charts, and Yosef is Yisoid, and so literally they're the same Bechina, same aspect. Therefore, Nemar Yosef, it says about Yosef, Bechar Shairoi Hadarlai. What does it say? He is a firstborn ox. Hadarlai, glory belongs to him. Says the Rebbe. Deconstruct this pasuk al pi remez, again al pi the giluyim chadashim of Rebbe Nachman. I hope by now you're tasting a little bit of what I meant, right? These are new structures, and they enable you to read psukim the way that you would never have been able to read them before, because you didn't know that the remazim and the hakadamas that Rebbe Nachman is revealing. Says the Rebbe, return to this pasuk. What does it mean on a simple level? We just said, firstborn ox, hadarlai. Says the Rebbe, okay, take it word by word. Bechar, hu bechinas haseichel kanal. We said Bechar is the aspect of seichel, and we're going to learn that in Torah Beis as a hamshech. Yosef was zeicha to the Bechar. Even though Reuven was the Bechar, Yosef was given it, Pishnayim, right? Ephraim and Menashe, he got the double portion. We're going to see that, the Yerusha. So Bechar bechinas haseichel. Shoyroi means an ox, but it could also mean to look, right? Ale shur, they climbed up on the wall to look. Shur could mean to look, to see. Even though it means, like Ashrei could be fortunate, over here it means a shar, but it could also mean Lashon histaklus, to look, to peer, to probe. So Bechar Shoyroi, a person has to shar the Bechar, right? A person has to look and find the Chochmah in everything. That was Yosef, it's the Bechar Shoyroi. He looked at the intellect. V'zeu Hadarlai. And when a person does that, Hadarlai. In the simple level, it means glory belongs to him. But the Targum Unkelis, which Rebbe Nachman is always making use of the Targum, the pasuk says, the Targum interprets this Ziv Le. What does Ziv Le mean? It shines for him. What did we say about the Chochmah? It's the Shemesh. And Meir loy b'chol drachav k'may Shemesh. If a person's connected to the Chochmah, the Seichel sheish b'chol davar, the whole world is lit up. The whole world is activated. The whole world is turned on. It's switched on. There's electricity. It's vibrancy. It's vitality. Lashon ar. It's a word that means light. Ziv. Because the seichel, the meaning, will illuminate every experience. Nothing's happenstance, nothing's arbitrary, nothing's meaningless. Everything is filled with Hashem's love, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's guidance, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. Afilu b'makom shaya oifel v'chayshech. Even in a place, shahaya, that used to be before you started living in this way, so it could be the same circumstance, nothing changed, but a person's going their whole life with a certain struggle, a certain challenge, a certain limitation. Shahaya oifel v'chayshech, and it was dark, and it was cold. Meir lo yaseichel. You find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that place. Meir lo yaseichel. It illuminates it for you. When a person's zeicha to look at the seichel and everything, and it brings him close to Hashem. Okay, now that we've laid out the major and the primary, or even all of the elements of this Geulah, of this revelation that is the universe of Torah Aleph, now we take a look at a vision of Rabba Bar Bachana, and then we're going to revisit it based on all these hakdamas. So first he brings the vision of Rabba Bar Bachana v'zeh perish, and this is the commentary of the following vision. Masha Amar Rabba Bar Bachana, that the Gemara says that Rabba Bar Bachana reported, Geulah, he said, this wave, the matbala svinta, that comes to sink a ship. Mischaze, it appears, kitzutzitza de nura chivarta beresha, like it has a white flame, tzitzutza de nura chivarta beresha, at its tip, right? Like the froth of the wave, when the wave carries over, it looks like white at the tip, right? White flame, and it's coming after that ship. It's coming to sink the ship. So how do you save yourself? The way to subdue this wave is ba'alavasa, a staff, the chakik alei, that's written on it, Ekya Asher Ekya. The staff that it says on it, Ekya Asher Ekya, the name that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu that he was supposed to carry with him to Mitzrayim, with the name that's on that staff, that's the way that a person is able to subdue this wave. So obviously, what's he talking about? And again, I mentioned before, there are many commentaries on the teachings of Rabbi Bar Chana. The Vilna Gaon has a whole parish, right? There was a book of the juggler and the king or something like that that's based on his interpretations. But everybody who wrote on Haggadah has his own interpretations. It just so happens to be, by the way, that the Vilna Gaon's approach to this particular mimer and Rebbe Nachman's approach are very, very similar, interestingly enough. But Rebbe Nachman said this is the bona fide meaning. This is not maybe, this is what Rabbi Bar Chana himself came to Rebbe Nachman and told him what he meant. Right? So this is mamish, he said, b'shem amrai. This is an incredible thing. This is the real secret. So says Rebbe Nachman, Geulah hu ha-yetzer hara. Geulah hu ha-yetzer hara. I always make the joke that maybe there are some Breslovers who don't eat Geulah. It's a minig, Geulah is mamish the yetzer hara. Geulah, the wave in this context, hu ha-yetzer hara, is the yetzer hara. Right? It's a wave. The matbal is sfinta. It's coming to sink the boat. But the word sfinta could mean a ship. It could also mean chen v'chashivas lashon safun v'chashiv. Something that safun means it's prominent. It's great. So the Yetzer Hara wants to drag down our grace and our prominence. He wants to take that which should be carried around and treasured by the world and lifted up and exalted, and he wants to drag it down into the watery depths. Chas v'shalom. Ki ha-Yetzer Hara roitze lahatbil ulahashvel chas v'shalom b'chinas hachein v'chashiva shel Yisrael. He wants to drag that down b'chinas malchus to kedusha. He doesn't want to let us live in a world that's full of Hashem's presence. To see malchus to kedusha, it's a moon that's lit up by the light of Hashem's presence, light lit up by the sun. It's a beautiful kingdom of God. It's a unified realm. No. He wants to drag us down into Amalek, into Esav. He says, you know how it looks? Bereisha, in the beginning, it looks white. You know why? Because the Yetzer Hara first will show up in mitzvahs. And he either pressures a person to take on too much too quickly, or he makes a person too intense, or he makes etc. etc. And this is the Yetzer Hara. Mamish. In one strategy or another, there's a medrash plia, an incredible medrash that says one of the opinions of what it was. That the Sar of Esav, the angel, showed up. There are various opinions in what form he showed up. There was one opinion that said he showed up like a Talmid Chacham. Imagine that. You happen to be stumbling through the desert. You see Yaakov Avinu who's fighting with the Gadol Adar. Right? That's one of the visions. That's what it says. He showed up like a. Why? Because this is what it means. Sometimes the Yetzer Hara can show up like a big tzaddik, a big Talmid Chacham, and sometimes you have to disregard because it's not the right thing. Right? Because Rashi over there said Eish Levana, but Umalach Mazaku. Right? Even though it's a white fire, it's a damaging angel. Eish Levana could look very beautiful, but it can be Mamish Afal Pikein. Malach Mazaku could be a damaging angel. How do you subdue it? And you subdue it with a staff that has on it written names. Says Rebbe Nachman, this is a symbol for the Torah. The way to get rid of the Yetzer Hara, like we learned yesterday, Rebbe Nachman brought from the Gemaras in Kedushin, Mashchei lebeis hamedrash. The way to overcome Esav, who wants us to live a meaningless life, is to find the Torah in everything, is to connect ourselves to the Torah, which even on the simple level of actually sitting and learning Torah, that's what Torah is. Right? Halacha gives us a system for immersive experiential spirituality throughout your day, so that you have contact points with the divine each and every moment and in every age and stage of life. That's what Torah is. So this is what the reference here is, Shu Kula Shmaisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the whole Torah, according to the Mekubalim, is all the names of Hashem. According, if you take a look at the introduction to the Ramban's commentary on Chumash, he explains the whole Torah is just one long name. It's one long shame of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shemus, the way God reveals Himself. Anna nafshi ksavis yahavis anoichi, says the Gemara in Shabbos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wrote His soul down, so to speak, and gave it to us. Right? That's the Torah. The Torah b'chinas vav, and the Torah is an aspect of a vav, the letter vav. Ki aluchas archan vav v'rachman vav, because the luchas were 6 by 6. But you and I know a little bit more deeply, based on the spheres, that the Torah is rooted in the sphere of Tiferes, which is Yaakov Avinu. Right? V'nasan lanu Torahs emes and titein emes le Yaakov. And what's the sphere of Tiferes? Is the center of Zeir Anpin, of the 6 spheres. And where do they show up in the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei? Yud is Chochmah, Hey is Binah, Vav is Tiferes. Now we understand why the Gemara tells us that the Luchos were Archon Vav and Rachman Vav. They were 6 by 6 because the Torah is the aspect of the 6 midas, right? And that's rooted in the Vav of Yud Kei Vav Kei. So says Rebbe Nachman, that's a hint to the Torah. So this is the aspect of a staff. What's a staff? A staff is a Vav, right? Meaning it's a Vav that has on it written names of Hashem. Names of Hashem is the whole Torah. Vav is mamish the Torah. Right, so this is how you subdue the Yetzer Hara that comes to sink your chen and chashivas. You bring it back by subduing it with the Torah. This is the aspect of the names of Hashem, Vav, which is the aspect of Vav. And again, Vav, and a Vav is the aspect of a staff. And it's all the names of Hashem. The Torah is how you subdue the Yetzer Hara. Oh my goodness, right? He wants to make a person crazy. Mamish crazy. The Yetzer Hara wants to make a person crazy. And it seems okay. Eish Lavana, it's beautiful. Live, eat, drink, be merry, and spend time like everybody else is spending time. And it looks so normal because everyone's doing it. It is absolute mishugas. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of our life. Mishuga mamish chas v'shalom ki balavera hu mishuga. There's something obviously missing in the life of a balavera. Kamasha amar abisinu zchana levarcha ein adam over avera ela imkei nichnas by ruach shtus. There's a ruach shtus that comes into a person. It wants to make a person mishuga, and that's what we learned in Shir Na'im. How did Rebbe Nachman interpret the ruach shtus? You remember he said v'chol zeh machma shtus. You remember what did Rebbe Nachman say that about? Who in Shir Na'im was described as being foolish? You remember the elephant. I don't want to cause anybody to have mice running around, or elephants for that matter, running around their house, right? But what we said, that Rebbe Nachman said, Chol zeh machma shtus, the elephant is foolish. Why? She'ein yodea mikoychai. Doesn't know his power. The Yetzer Hara robs us of our power. He makes us feel puny and small. He makes us meshuga, ruach shtus. Now, okay, a little bit of a old school method, but maybe a meshuga sometimes needs a good zetz. Sometimes you need sometimes a meshuga needs a little bit of a kick in the pants sometimes. But lasam aleim shemas, or alternatively, a person can heal them with amulets and names of Hashem. The Torah does both of us. The Torah gives us a zetz because it's a stick, it's a vav. Sometimes the Torah will give you it will hit a person, chas v'shalom, just gently, and nudge a person along, and also it has shemas, so it can heal that way too. There are two aspects. Not getting into this again now because we still have a lot to cover and very short period of time left, but this also correlates to the spiritual Torah that we learn, shemas, and the physical expression of the Torah throughout nature, right, which is Gashmias. And that's maybe what Rebbe Nachman meant in the beginning when he says, V'achayin v'achashivas nesal v'nesar b'fnei kol mishitzrichim hein beruchni hein begashmi, right, because it's reflective of our engagement with Torah, both in a ruchniya sense, like literally reading Torah, and also in a Gashmiya sense, meaning encountering a Kadosh Baruch Hu throughout our lived experience of life. There's ruchnias and there's Gashmias. We're not getting into that presently. Okay, so that's the Torah, and that's how the Torah heals the Yetzer Hara, which wants to make a person crazy, both by the stick, which is the staff, and by the shemas that are written on that staff, and it drives out the insanity of ruach shtus and the foolishness. How do you subdue this wave, which is the Yetzer Hara? Ba'alvasa, with this staff, vav, the chakak alei shemas. That's what Rabbi Baruch Chana meant. He's explaining Torah Aleph. Vezehu, and finally we return to the opening pasuk with which we began. Ashrei timimei darech. Fortunate are those of a wholesome path, says the Rebbe again. Deconstruct. Ashrei lashon estaklus. Sure, shar. Right. In this case, Ashrei. Now the Rebbe sees it as a terminology for seeing. Ashrei timimei darech. Timimei is bechinas Yaakov. Ishtam. Yaakov Avinu, Ashrei Tamime. Yaakov is a person who sees, just like his son Yosef. Bechar Shar. Ashrei Tamime. Same thing. They're people who have their eyes wide open to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu everywhere and in everything. This is our tradition. Shu bechinas ha-seichel kanal. Hainu lizkos lehistakel ala seichel sheyesh bechol davar, which is Tamime derech. Because Umeir Lai Bechol Jurachav Shekamai Shekasav, I'm reading outside like we said yesterday, Chochmas Adam Ta'ir Panav Lifanav, because it illuminates a person's paths. Bechol Dirachecha Da'ehu. So Ashrei Timime Yaakov Avinu, who sees the Chacham and everything, Darech, And all of a sudden it opens up pathways to a person. There's omek in life. You can go deep. You don't stay on the surface. You go in, you go in, you go in. How do you zeicha to live that way? This is what it means to walk with the Torah of God. This is what halacha means, right? To walk with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mamish. When a person learns Torah properly with koyach, through this, we give strength to light up this experience of this world. Adkan Torah Aleph, Hadron Alach, Torah Aleph, Okay, and again, just scratch the surface, but we have no time. We have to go into Torah Beis. Torah Beis is our very first Lashon Rabbeinu Zochar Livracha. Torah Beis was actually written by Rebbe Nachman himself, so it's extra. If we were learning Eon, you could be medayik every word. And it goes on the pasuk, Vayemer Hashem al Moshe, Emar el HaKehana b'nei Aaron v'amarta aleim, speak to the Kehanim, the children of Aaron, and say to them, L'nefesh le'yatam ba'amav, do not become impure to nefesh, a person of the nation outside of Shiva Kroivim, right? It's a sefer d'tzniusa. It's brought in a very, very ancient sefer that's called sefer d'tzniusa. Some say it was written by Yaakov Avinu. That's included in the Zohar Kodesh Parshas Truma, which the Vilna Gaon is a very famous pirush on. It's called sefer d'tzniusa, and it's written in their very mysterious sefer, Minukva de Pardaska, which means from the nostril, from the hollow of the nostril, Mashach Rucha de Chayil Mashiach. From that place, very, very mysterious, from that place comes the spirit of Mashiach. Now the Mekubalim explain that this particular reference is a reference to what's called Arik Ampin, which is the parts of, one of the partsufim of Keser, a very, very lofty place, and over there's a nose, again it's spiritually speaking, there's a bechina of a nose, whatever that is, and from the right nostril, that's where Mashiach ben David draws the energy, from the left nostril is Mashiach ben Yosef. Big secrets, not getting into this now. This is what it's referring to. Says the Rebbe, what does this mean? The main weapon of Mashiach is tefillah. Rebbe Nachman said Mashiach will conquer the whole world without one bullet being fired. There won't be rebels running around and taking things over. Mashiach will conquer the world with the consciousness of prayer, with words of chen and grace, not with bullets. He said, without one bullet being fired. Mashiach's weapon is prayer. And prayer is the aspect of a nose. And my praise is echta malach, which means I will withhold my anger. Echta means to close up. I will hold back my anger from you, and that's my praise, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the word echtam can mean a nose, right? A chaitem. Says the Rebbe, utilasi echtam, tehila, praise, is a connection to a nose. These two things are connected. Umisham ikr chiyusa, and we just learned from the sefer d'tzniusa, that's where Mashiach draws his whole energy. V'chol melchamtoi sheyaseh, and all the wars that Mashiach will fight. V'chol hakfishoi sheyichvosh, and all the conquerings that Mashiach will conquer. Hakol misham, everything will come from there. Kama shekasa, the pasuk says, v'harichoi b'yiras Hashem, and he will smell, again, the nose, right? He will smell out with the fear of God, right? The Gemara says, Mayach v'dain, he will smell and judge. He won't need to know and listen to different claims. He will just know who's right and who's wrong. He'll be able to smell it out. The aspect of the nose. And this is the main weapon of a person. Tefillah and bakasha. Yaakov Avinu said, this is what I took. B'charbi u'v'kashti, with my sword and with my bow. Perish Rashi, tefillah u'bakasha. That's the weapon. It's tefillah and bakasha. Mashiach's weapon, prayer. The nose. David says, I don't rely on my physical bow. Rather, right? I just praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's my weapon. The same idea that utilasi says Mashiach, my praise is echtam lach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's praise is my chaitam, is my nose. That is my yiras Hashem, haricha b'yiras Hashem. It's the aspect of the nostril, and that's where Mashiach gets his energy from. But in order for a person to have this messianic weapon, because it isn't just speaking about Mashiach Klali, everything Rebbe Nachman is speaking about our own individual Mashiach. We said in Torah Aleph, our own individual Geulah, in that person's own life, the moon will become like the sun. In your own life, you have your own Mashiach inside of you, and he has a weapon, and his weapon is prayer. But how do you get that weapon of prayer? So the only way to get that is tzarich lekabel al yedei bechinas Yosef. The way to get this special kind of tefillah is through Yosef HaTzadik. What's Yosef? Hainu Shmiras HaBris. Is guarding the covenant. A person that's working on, Yesod. Excellent, Yesod. So I'm going to say that. Yes, excellent. Meaning you're going from Tefillah, in order to have Tefillah, which is Malchus, you have to preempt it with Yesod, right? Because that's where Tefillah, Malchus, draws its energy, is from Yesod. I said, you remember in the Kabbalah Shir, the whole Torah Beis is Amud Adem, right? So Malchus is drawing on Yesod. You need to get it from Yosef, which is Shmir Sabris. Chagar Charbecha, it says in Tehillim, Chagar Charbecha, gird your sword, Al Yarech, on your thigh. The thigh is obviously a reference to the bris, right? Al Yarech, and Chagar Charbecha, what's Charbecha? Is a sword. Becharbi Bekashdi, Tefillah and Bakasha. There's a kesher between Yerech and Cherev, which Rashi had interpreted by Yaakov Avinu as a reference to Tefillah. The way to get this kind of messianic prayer is by working on this inyan of Shmir Sabris. I gave a shir recently in Sichas around 2 shiurim ago. You'd like to listen, it's on YouTube and on other platforms. It doesn't mean a person's perfect. Nobody's perfect in Shmir Sabris. Every person has their own madrega where they're at. Every person's dealing with the Yetzaharas. But a person is consciously working on it, right? To the degree that a person is, your tefillah is alive. If a person's mamish checked out and a person's living a life of tumah, their tefillah is dead. And then they can't complain because they're doing it to themselves. Okay, so this is they can't complain. Of course, they complain to Hashem. Hashem should help them, right? But these two things are correlated. It says about David HaMelech and about Mashiach, right? It says to David HaMelech, from one of your descendants, I will make the throne, which is the throne of Mashiach. And if you look at the Mefarshim, that's a reference to Mashiach, which is the aspect of tefillah, like we just said, right? Because Mashiach's whole thing, his weapon is tefillah, and the pasuk continues, Im yishbru b'necha brisi. It's mamash an open pasuk. I will give you the messianic energy, mi pri bitnecha ashis l'chiselach, which is a reference to the throne of Mashiach, im, but it's conditional, im yishmru b'necha brisi. If there's Shmir Sabris, Hainu Ayideh B'chinas Yosef. It's the aspect of Yosef. Now Yosef, Sheshamar Sabris, Yosef is the quintessential Shomer Abris, because he's with Eishes Beitifar, right, and he's able to break free, and Vayima'en, right, Yosef is the whole Indian of the tzaddik who guards the bris, that's his model, Natalas B'chayra. So therefore he received the firstborn, and that's why it's a correlate to Torah Aleph, because we just learned that, right? He took Bishnayim, something beautiful you get to see when you do Likutei Moharan like this, you start to see the meta picture, right? And you start to see the links, otherwise you learn Torah Aleph, 1 year, and you do Torah Beis the next year, you don't really see the link so much, right? You know what it means that he had the B'chayra? It means that he had Tefillah. What does tefillah have to do with the Bechar? Says the Rebbe, because you know what Bechar is? You know what the Bechar gets? What's called Pishnayim. Now Pishnayim means just double, right? He gets a double portion. But says the Rebbe, we'll look at the actual words. Pi is the mouth, Shnayim. Says the Rebbe, that's a reference to prayer. Ki tefillah hu pi shnayim. Because tefillah is a dibor, pi, that has two aspects. Shnayim, sheish b'hem shivcha shel makam, u'she'elas tzrachav. Shemana Esrei has two aspects, praising God, asking your needs. That's called pi shnayim. Yosef, who's the shomer abris, im yishbru b'necha brisi, Yosef HaTzadik becomes the vessel for the tefillah, pi shnayim, which he takes from who? Well, we're going to get there in a minute. But who b'chinas, we're going to see the note in a second. Cherev pifiyais biyadam. This is the double-edged sword. What sword? Cherev. Chagor charbachal yarich. Becharbi bekashti. That's the aspect of the weapon, which we already said is an aspect of Mashiach's weapon, which is prayer. A double-edged sword. What's a double-edged sword? Cherev pifiyais. Pi shnayim. Right? It's a cherev that is pifiyas. So you see what the Rebbe is doing? He binds concepts again and again and again, each one to the next one, back and back and back, linking them together. It's a binyan. Cherev pifiyas biyadam b'chinas shtei piyas. It has two mouths. Pi shnayim. Right? The same idea. Well, who did Yosef get the Bechar from? Who was supposed to be the Bechar? Ruvain. Ruvain. Why did he take it from Ruvain? What did he do? Because he moved around the beds, which the Mefarshim tell us, it was a little bit more sinister than that, is that he was not Shomer the Bris. Right? Ki hitala b'shmir sabris. So Ruvain, that was in Shomer Abris, loses Pishnayim, which is Tefillah. Yosef, who's Shomer Abris, he takes the Tefillah. Right? And that's that aspect. If you look in the footnote over here, the note on the side. Rebbe Nachman says, "V'alkein Yosef b'shvul shazacha l'bechinas tefila." Yosef HaTzadik, that who through his shmir sabris is zeicha to the messianic weapon of prayer, shebechinas tehilasi echtam, which is the aspect of tefila, tehila, that's connected to the echtam, to the nose, which is the nukva dipar daska, right? Which means the right nostril of Arik Anpin, of that keser, of that very lofty realm. Bechinas chias hanimshach min nukva dipar daska. Okay, and therefore Yosef HaTzadik is called Nikra Ben Pyras Yosef. He's called Ben Pyras Yosef, this glorious child. Shein bechinas Taf Reish Pei Vav Oros, because Pyras is a number. Taf Reish 686. Pei Vav Oros. What are those six? How do you get that gematria? 686. Shem Shiva Shemos. Because if you take 7 holy names of Hashem that are Av, Sag, Ma, and Ban, which is basically if you take the letters Yud, K, Vav, K, and you open them up. So instead of being gematria 26, because Yud is 10 and Hey is 5, and Vav is 6 and Hey is 5, so 26. But instead of that, you take the Yud and you spell it out. Yud, Vav, Dalet. You take the Hey and you spell it out. Hey, Yud. Oh, but there are 3 ways of spelling a Yud. Hey. Hey, Yud. Hey, Hey. Hey, Aleph. Right? And then you take the Vav. There are 3 ways of spelling Vav. Vav Yud Vav, Vav Aleph Vav, Vav Vav. And then the Hey, and you combine all of those different gematrias, so then it gives you 4 different gematrias if you spell all those names differently. Av, Ayin Beis, Sag, Ma, and Ban. And if you do the same thing with the Shem Elokim, there are less variation, but it gives you 3 gematrias. What's called Kasa, Kana, Kamag. Kuf Samach Aleph, Kuf Nun Aleph, Kuf Mem Gimel. If you put all those gematrias together, which are called in Kabbalah the Miluyim of the Shemos, Miluyim means you fill them out, and you connect them together, it's gematria Taf Reish Pei Vav. Ben Pyras. Makesher, Shemekabel Minuk V'der Pardaska. And you get these lights from Pardaska. You know why? Ki Pardaska Bigamatria Taf Reish Pei Vav. Pardaska has the same gematria of Pyras. Yosef HaTzadik, that because of Shmir Sabris, is Zoicha de Pishnayim, which is Cherev Pifios, which is this double-edged sword, this weapon of Mashiach Klei, is called Ben Pyras. Pyras gematria Pardaska. Because he is drawing minukva de pardaska mashach rucha l'chai de meshicha umisha zoicha l'cherev hazeh will finish, and a person who's zoicha to the sword sarach leida eich lilcha mamacherev. Not so simple. You have to know how to use the sword. Shaliyatay so liyamin or l'smal. You can't drag it either to the yamin, which we interpret as meaning that a person says, no, everything comes from Hashem. I don't need a daven because I believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs everything, so there's no makom for tefillah. Oil small chas v'shalom, where a person says, "Oh, I'm mamish the one doing it because my tefillah, I'm demanding things from Hashem." That's not either the mahalach, right? That's called yamin or small. You can't bring it to one side or to the next side. Rather, it needs to be in the middle. Middle, that sounds familiar, sure, because the whole Torah is talking about the middle, right? David, Yosef, and all the way up we learned about Pardaska, which is Keser, Arik Anpin. And now the next theme, which we're going to open up with tomorrow, is the concept of Yaakov Avinu, which is Tiferes, and that completes the whole chain. And so Rebbe Nachman is revealing these teachings around the Amud Edem Se'isa. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help, that we should bring in through Shmir Sabris and working and trying our best, especially now during Shaivavim, to be able to bring this messianic energy of prayer, grace, but in the proper, appropriate, humble, but also powerful way. And we should be free from everything we should be free from, and our tefillah should have chen. Divrei Chachamim benachas nishma'im ashreinu matov chakenu. I'll just remind you, we've learned to now less than 1 full page. There are 411 teachings. However much you think you gained, I'm telling you guys, expansion opens up the whole Torah like nothing else. Thank you, Yidin. Thank you, Shri. Thank you so much. האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני